Welcome to my bivariate presentation titled, Trust Me, I'm a Politician. My quantitative analysis will be examining whether civic engagement affects how trusting people are of one another, politicians, and government. I will be using data from the International Peace Protest Survey, which has an N of 6,753. The tests I use for my study are reliability analysis, cross-tabulation, chi-squared, and ANOVA. The rationale behind my research is based on Robert Putnam's social capital theory. The theory claims that declining involvement with civic organizations is causing a decline in social capital. Since people are becoming less trusting of one another, they are also becoming less trusting of politicians and government, and therefore are less involved and confident with their government. Lisa Young examined Putnam's theory using the Alberta Civil Society Survey. Her analysis uses a two-step approach, and she found that involvement in community organizations has a causal relationship with interpersonal trust. She then found that interpersonal trust was a strong predictor of trust and confidence in government and political institutions. My hypothesis is that increased civic engagement will create increased trust and confidence. Like Young's study, this is the inverse logic of Putnam's theory, where declining participation led to declining trust. My hypothesis differs from Putnam and Young's in that I modify their two-step approach by merging interpersonal trust with trust in politicians and government. I feel that increased civic participation is the causal mechanism behind both forms of trust. So my independent variable is civic engagement, and my dependent variable is trust and confidence. The null hypothesis is that there is no relationship between civic engagement and levels of trust. For my dependent variable, I created an index of 8 ordinal variables that combined interpersonal trust with measures of trust and confidence in politicians and government. Interpersonal trust is measured through the questions, people can be trusted and people can count on each other. I included 2 questions measuring trust in politicians, and the rest of the questions measure trust and confidence in democratic government. All the questions I chose were already on the same scale, which is 1 to 5. I reversed the values for secrets in politics and no use in voting as they were negative questions. As my reliability analysis shows, my index has an alpha score of 0.6637. Since the alpha is greater than 0.6, I can conclude that the variables are related enough to be combined into an index. Since the minimum value for each variable is 1 and the maximum is 5, the value range of my index is from 8 to 40. After running a frequency distribution, I see that the mean is 25.6 and the skew is negative 0.372, which indicates that most respondents are a little less trusting and that there are more values below the mean than there are above. I then recoded to split the index into quarters to reduce the value range to 1 to 4, 1 being least trusting and 4 being most trusting. For my independent variable, I also created an index. I combined 12 ordinal variables asking respondents about membership in different organizations. The values for these variables were active, passive, former, and non-members. I'd initially included all of the organizations listed in this survey, but dropped 4 to increase the alpha score of my index from 0.7173 to 0.7414. Here is a frequency distribution for each of the questions in the independent variable index. As you can see, the majority of respondents were non-members for each category of organization, so it made sense for me to create an index including multiple organizations. I recoded to combine former and non-members into one group, dropped respondents who failed to answer, and split the index into thirds, giving it a new value range of 1 to 3, 1 being least involved and 3 being most involved. As the crosstab shows, there is a positive relationship between civic participation and increases in trust. 39% of non-members have the lowest measure of trust, while 33.5% of active members have the highest measure. The Pearson's chi-squared score of 0.0000 indicates that my results are not simply due to sampling error, and I can conclude that there is a significant relationship between civic participation and trust. Because both indexes are ordinal and the crosstab isn't square, the measure of association used is tau c, which has a value of 0.198. This indicates that there is a moderately positive relationship between civic participation and trust. If I had followed Young's study and only included the 2 interpersonal trust variables in the index, the tau c value actually decreases to 0.15537, which indicates a weaker relationship. After running ANOVA, I see that the F probability is 0.000, which indicates that there is a highly significant difference in trust across civic participation levels. Since the mean score for each civic participation level is out of the confidence interval for the other levels, each level is significantly different from the others, which was confirmed by a Sheffey test. In conclusion, there is strong evidence to support my hypothesis, and I was able to eliminate the second step in Young's quantitative study of Putnam's theory. This indicates that Young's trust indexes may have been measuring the same thing. In my analysis, it was not increasing interpersonal trust that predicted increases in trust and confidence in government, but rather civic engagement predicted increases in all forms of trust that were measured. So what about civic organizations causes these trust increases? I would hypothesize that these groups may be structurally organized in a democratic fashion, or perhaps the organizations have direct relationships with their democratic governments, such as seeking funding or advocating for change. Critics of Putnam's social capital theory, such as Professor Neil Nevitt, have raised concerns about civic groups like the KKK or criminal organizations. The same increases in trust aren't seen in these types of organizations. Now, while this poses a problem for Putnam's theory, it reinforces my own. Increases in government trust is only observed with organizations that operate with democratic norms and ideals, or that work with democratic governments. Therefore, increases in trust and confidence in government aren't a result of increases in interpersonal trust, but through participation in these organizations. This is an area where further research is necessary. And finally, here's the syntax I used for my study.